So we're going to do page 18. So page 18 is on this new mission that we learned, where it says at the end, have a mekabel, espala adam, sever panim yafus. Means every person with a cheerful countenance. There's a similar phrase, almost that sounds like the same thing. I'm sure there must be a difference. Having mekabel is kol adam b'simcha. Receive every person with joy. In other words, it just means very simple that when you see someone, you greet someone. First of all, we'll learn later in Pirkei Avos the importance of greeting someone when you see them. And in fact, there was a certain sage that they asked him, what does he attribute certain blessings that he had in his life? He said, because never did it happen that someone would say, hello to me first. I was always the first to greet all the people that I met. So greeting someone is one thing. And the second question is, how do I greet them? What does my face look like when I see them? The previous Rebbe once said, he spoke about the difference between life in America and life there used to be in the old country. In a small shtetl, people much more, they were closer to each other and they helped each other and they cared about each other. Today, people live in a big city and everything is so distant and cold. So he said, to appreciate this is go back to the Shalom Aleichem that we say Friday night. Friday night, we greet the angels, we say Shalom Aleichem. And what's the last part? Shalom. There's 4 parts. First we say hello, then we say welcome, then we say please bless us, and then we say Shalom, goodbye. So the Free Rebbe said that today in America, when 2 people meet and you say Shalom Aleichem to someone, it's usually more like Tzeis Shalom than Shalom Aleichem. Like, please don't waste my time. So when you greet someone, it should be in a pleasant way. And I think one of the things that the Mishnah is also saying is sometimes a person's just not in the best mood. We all are human. And part of being human is that things are not always the same. Like a chassid once said, a picture on the wall is always the same. If you draw the guy in the picture smiling, he'll always be smiling, his whole picture life. And if he has a sour face, he'll have a sour face, his whole picture life. But a live human being, we have ups and we have downs, and ultimately we go up, but there's ups and downs in life. So a person could one day be not in such a good mood, something happened, something's on their mind, but that should not be a reason, and that's not an excuse why I should make the other person feel uncomfortable and almost offended. In other words, when you, and let's look at it this way. Remember we said, don't do to others what you wouldn't want others to do to you. So if I meet someone and I say hello, and they respond with a very cold hello, and you say to yourself, nah, it doesn't bother me, there's probably something on their mind. It doesn't work that way. You feel hurt. I just greeted them, I said hello, and they're like very cold, as if I'm not interested in talking to you. I'm not interested in seeing you. And the justification is not a justification, which means I'm not allowed to allow whatever I'm feeling go over, and that should affect the way I make other people feel. That's not an excuse. And I think that's what the Mishnah is saying. You should always greet every person with a cheerful face or with a simcha face, which means they don't have to chas v'shalom get hurt or suffer or be offended because I'm not in the mood for one reason or another. When it comes to the other person, I have to act accordingly. And I guess, being that you do to others what don't do to others, what the others don't do to you, that's what we would expect from someone else. Yeah.
That's kind of very hard to do when you're like in a lot of pain or something. Just like, hi.
It's another proof that it's a good thing. A lot of pain to do. The things that are not so amazing are easy to do. No, it's true. It's true, especially if it's something really painful. It's not, of course, we have this rule that every rule has an exception to the rule. Sometimes things are just way out. But nevertheless, the fact that it's difficult, the whole idea of working on character traits, changing our character traits, not being upset and not having an outburst because someone did something to me or said something to me. All these things are hard. Giving away of my time is hard. Giving away of my money is hard. Sometimes I have something to say and it's a good joke, but I'm going to be offending somebody. It's very hard to contain myself. So a lot of things are hard, but the fact that it's hard just means that, this is what we're working on, to change, refine our character traits. So usually the good things don't come so natural. We have an animal soul, so the animalistic reaction is just to do what's comfortable for me. I don't think so much about what it means for the other person. So that's what we have to feel about it. So when I think that it's hard, I should say to myself, but if it would be the reverse, if I walk over to someone and say hello and they bark at me, how would I feel? So I shouldn't do it to them. No? Any difference of opinion? Everyone agrees that it's hard. You're right, Rachel. Everyone agrees that it's hard. But we know that when something's hard, that's usually a sign that it's a good thing. It's the right thing. Okay, we're going to do another Mishnah. We're coming closer to the end. Mishnah 17. So Rabbi Gamliel, he was the head of the Jewish nation at the time. And this is his son, Shimon. So Mishnah Yudzayin, Shimon, his son, said, Kol Yomai, my entire life, Gadalti ben HaChachamim, I grew up amongst the sages. Because his father was the highest authority of Torah in that generation. He was the leader of the generation. And all the greatest Torah sages would come to him for questions, discussions. And these are the kind of people that were walking in and out of his house, the greatest sages of Torah. So he said, I learned a lot from observing them. And what did I learn? I learned and I found there's nothing better than silence. We'll soon explain. And that's one thing. The second thing is, the main thing is not the studying as much as the action. And the third thing is, Kol Hamarbe Dvarim, a person who speaks excessively, maybe this will ultimately lead to sin. Each one of these three things need to be explained separately. So we'll start with the first one. What does it mean that I didn't find anything better than silence? Let's go back to the sheets. We have a list of phrases and quotes related to this. And that is on page 19. So of course, the first question is, so what is he saying? That If you really want to do things right, just be quiet all the time, can be. As a Jew, we have to be talking. There's words of Torah, we say, words of davening. And we just finished talking about greeting other people nicely. So you talk to other people and you interact with people. And of course, family, you should talk to your spouse, talk to your children. How could there be such a statement? Best thing is just don't talk. Doesn't make any sense. So the pashtus, it doesn't mean don't talk. It just means that there's two ways to look at speech. One way is that I open my mouth in the morning to say Moda Ani. Until I'm mapil, I don't close it unless there's a need. Otherwise, I just keep talking and talking and talking. And whoever I meet and whatever comes up, I'm talking and talking and talking. In other words, very loose tongue, as they call it. So I'm talking unless there's a need to be quiet. The other way is the other way around. I'm quiet unless there's a need to talk. So if you want to say the same thing, rephrase it, paraphrase it, it means when a person speaks, it should only be words with content and meaning and purpose. And we shouldn't have a loose tongue. So I'm basically silent unless there's a good reason why I should say what I'm going to say. So we have a few quotes about it. Now, what it means, generally speaking, is a loose tongue is, in fact, we see very often people are very loose, they're cracking jokes, they just talk a lot, and then either you end up speaking Lashon Hara about another person, or you end up making fun of somebody, or other things which are inappropriate in speech. When a person is very well aware of what's coming out of their mouth and what they're saying, then they can be careful and be sure that what comes out of their mouth is going to be appropriate. They tell a story of a certain Hasidic Rebbe that he told his students that he wants to go on a trip. And this happened from time to time. They wouldn't know where they're going, why they're going, just took them on a trip. And they knew there was always some hidden reason. Sometimes they found out what the hidden reason was, sometimes they didn't. So they went on this trip, wasn't very far away, and they came to an inn. When they came to the inn, they told the innkeeper that the rabbi is here, this is a very big rabbi, and we'd like to eat a meal. But being that this is a very special rabbi, we want to make sure that the food is really 100% kosher. So they started questioning him that who was the one that slaughtered the meat? What's his name? Is he reliable? Is it possible to see the knife that he used? Could we see the other tools that he used? That could we be sure about this, sure about that? Question after question after question, because they wanted to make sure when the Rebbe is going to this person's house that the food he's going to eat is going to be 100% kosher without any doubt. As they were asking all these questions, there was this old man, they didn't notice him before. He was sitting with his face towards the stove, warming up, turns around, and he looks at them and says, "Young man, you're so concerned about what goes into your mouth. Are you equally concerned about what comes out of your mouth?" And he turned around to face the wall again. After this happened, the Rebbe said, "Okay, we're going home. I wanted you to hear these words from this person." Assumingly, he must have been a hidden tzaddik of sort, and he wanted them to hear this lesson from this person. So they're very often, people are very careful about what we're careful what goes into our mouths. It should be kosher, and this actually isn't good enough, that actually is even better, and this one is super better, and gotta be careful, and this and that. And what comes out of our mouth could be just as damaging, and with things like Lashon Hara, or offending somebody, embarrassing somebody, insulting somebody, or other things which are inappropriate when it comes to speech. So therefore, we have to be careful with speech, and that's why we say there's nothing better than silence, which means, in essence, I'm silent unless what I have to say is meaningful and purposeful, and I know that I'm saying the right thing in the right time, in the right place. One of the words, these are words written by Shlomo HaMelech. I think it's in Mishlei and Proverbs, and it's a very powerful statement, and that is Hachayim v'Hamaves b'yad haloshen. Life and death are in the hands of the tongue. In other words, people usually say it's only words. I'm just speaking, what big deal? But words could, God forbid, change a people's life for the better or destroy people's lives. First of all, I think we can understand this in a very literal way. Could you think of any example how just words could end up destroying somebody's life?
If we
What?
say something negative for someone, maybe that's gonna be a cause to
Someone hurting him, right? What is that what you wanted to say? Same thing. That's what one of the things about Lashon Hara. I'm talking to someone, I say, you know what this person is, you know what he did, and they get all angry, all upset. The next thing you know, that he could get hurt or God forbid even killed because of something that you said, that you provoked this person. And sometimes people don't even know about certain things, and you're the one who exposed it, and that leads to things that are happening. And also positive. Sometimes there's a person who's going through a very hard time. He has no job, has no sustenance. His wife, his children, everybody's suffering. And really he's not getting any help. And this person takes the time to go to someone and say to him, you know, I know this person, you can trust him, he's honest, he's a very good worker, maybe give him a chance and hire him for a job. And he hires him. And his whole life turns around. It's an example of all I did was use words, but by the word that I use, I gave somebody life. And also the reverse could happen, where you go to someone, get to in a second, Shira. You can go to someone and you say, this guy working for you, you know who he is, you know what he does? And then they fire him and it destroys his life. Or sometimes in a marriage, where a person could say something to a husband against the wife, to a wife against the husband, and God forbid, destroy the relationship. And in one way, say something which makes them more admire the other and adds life, and one way could destroy life. Yes, sure.
Just in linguistics, there's like a concept of certain words or verbs that when you say them, they actually like create the entity or whatever you're saying. For example, like when one gets married, if the words are not uttered, then there's no marriage. Like you can do whatever you want, but if these words are not said, like for example, Jewish marriage, you know, if the sentence is not, you know, said and the action's done.
So the words make the difference.
So the word is actually action sometimes.
Yeah. So what does it mean? It's very interesting. There's a medrash that tells us the story behind this phrase. And again, I'm saying this as an introduction. The story itself has a lot of depth, but this is the story in the medrash on a simple level. That actually life and death is in the hands of the tongue. And the story is that there was once a king of a certain country. I think in the Medrash it says which country, that he was sick. And all the doctors were looking for a remedy. Nobody could find any cure for him. And there's one doctor who said the normal, all the regular medications that you're thinking of, nothing's going to help him. And obviously all the doctors agreed. There's only one thing in the world that could help him, and that is milk from a lioness. Only that animal, the milk of this lion, of a lioness, will bring him back to life, will restore his life. Okay, it's a great idea, but how do you get milk from a lioness? Who's going to go milk a lioness? So being that Shlomo Melech was known as the greatest, wisest man on earth, so they consulted with him. So Shlomo Melech gave advice to his general, his top general of his army. His name was Yoav ben Tzruya, and he sent him out on a mission. And he went to out into the jungle, wherever it was, and he came to an area where there was a lion's den, and he brought with him, this is where the Medrash tells the story, 10 sheep. And he sent one of the sheep towards the direction of the lion, which of course devoured the sheep. The next day, he brought another sheep, but this time he walked a little bit closer. And the third day walked a little bit closer. And the fifth day a little bit closer, and the ninth day a little bit closer. On the 10th day, the lioness allowed him that she should be milked. And he took that milk because she became his friend. So he took that milk and he went back to bring it to the king. On his way back, It's a long journey, so he's sleeping and he has a dream. In his dream, all the organs of his body are having an argument. The hands say, I get all the credit. I'm the one who milked the lioness. The feet say, I get all the credit. Without me, you'd never be able to do this. The brain says, the head, I get all the credit. It's the brain. Without me, what would happen? Everyone is arguing. And then the tongue says, I get all the credit. Without me, it'd all be nothing. And they all gang up on the tongue. All the organs in the body say, yeah, what are you talking about? You're nothing. You have nothing to do with this. You contributed nothing to this success. Okay, I'll show you. Anyway, they come to the king and he tells the king, I brought milk from a cat for the king. And the king says, milk from a cat? Who asked you for milk from a cat? We need milk from a lioness. You come here to make fun of us. Guards, take him away. Tomorrow he'll be executed in Nezian. Okay, so they put him into jail to execute him for the next day. He has a dream again. And all the organs of the body attack the tongue. What did you do to us? What did you say, a cat? Look what's happening. So I told you, it's all me. Tomorrow, I'll fix it up. Anyway, the next day, they give him a chance to say his last words. So he says to them, of course it's milk from a lioness. You'll drink it, you'll see it, you'll be cured. What I meant to say was that the lioness became tame like a kitten, like a cat. That's all I meant. Okay, they tried the milk, they drank the milk, he became cured, and everybody was happy. So Shlomo Melech wrote, "Hachayim v'hamaves," life and death is in the hands of the tongue. So again, every story in the Medrash has much more depth to it than it seems on the surface. But what it means is, don't take it lightly and say, oh, it's only speech, it's only talking, it's just the tongue. The tongue could, God forbid, destroy lives and could build. I remember somebody once told me, we talk about the media a lot today, that he walked in, this head of an editor of a newspaper, the owner of a newspaper, walked in to his workers and said, okay, today you'll start writing about the war. So they said, what war? There is no war. So he says, so you'll make a war. Basically, let's say now there's Russia and Ukraine. And everybody's looking to see what the world is saying. Where's the world? What it says in the newspaper. Not only what they quote from people, what kind of slant they put to it, how they present it. They can present that the whole world is against you. And then you get angry. But all that happened because that's the way they put it into words. And that causes a war. And God forbid, who knows how many people get killed because you. So unfortunately, we see that in the newspapers, journalism is something in today's world where people really, not only they don't care about it, they thrive on this. Take a person, destroy his personality, do everything they can to write how terrible he is, destroy his job, destroy his relationship, destroy all his opportunities. And actually, that's considered a very successful journalist, that he really made a big difference in the world. But unfortunately, it only helps us to see more the power of writing and the power of speaking. I'm putting it together because it's the same idea. What comes out of your mouth, what you're saying. Speech in a way it's even worse than writing, because when you put something on paper, it's permanent, much more than speech. Speech is for the moment, whoever's there hears it. So basically, we have to remember that words go very far away and they could make the difference in a person of life and the opposite. Number 4, kol hamar b'dvarim may be chet, which means whoever engages in excessive talk brings on sin. So I think the emphasis here on the word excessive. And how do you describe excessive? Where do you draw the line? I guess excessive means if there's no purpose in the talk, it's just talking for the sake of talking. And like I said before, I think the best term I would use for this is a loose tongue. Not to really think before I speak what I'm saying, how there are people in the room, how are they going to react to what I say? Am I going to be hurting anybody when I say this? To be mindful of all these things, and then I could say whatever I want to say. So even though speaking is something which is very powerful in a good way, and there are good things that one could say, but excessive means if you do too much, you might go off in the wrong direction with the speech. Now, I put down a few things on this list to show also the opposite. As much as it says that quiet and being silent is the best policy, it's also true that sometimes you're not allowed to be silent. You have to speak up. And if you're being silent, you could be the one that's responsible for negative things happening. So it's like everything else. There's an advantage in silence. There's an advantage in speech. And we have to find the right balance, back to the balance. It's the art of life is to know the balance. But the Gemara tells a story that Alexander the Great once had I don't know if this was a performance or this was just something to do this for his personal entertainment. He had two people, both were supposed to be speaking about a certain subject, and each one was supposed to bring out the advantage of their side. One was supposed to be the advocate for speech, and the other one was the advocate for silence. And so he'll do a better job. So the guy who was supposed to be the advocate for silence gave a whole speech why silence is the best thing. So the other guy said, well, you just disproved your theory because all you were doing until now was speaking. If you wouldn't have the ability to speak, how would you ever explain the quality and the advantages of being silent? So again, of course, there is such thing as speech, but there are times where you have to speak and times that the right thing to do is to be quiet. And there are times where the right thing is to speak. So that is number 6. I'm skipping 5 for a minute. I'll go back to it. Number 6 is about Eov. These are the words, Eov sheshosak, Job, because he was silent, that's why things happened to him. You might remember this from Chumash, from the parasha, that there were 3 people that advised Paro what to do with the Yidden. When the Yidden were in Mitzrayim, Paro was terrified because they're growing exponentially and they're going to take over the country. What should we do? So we had 3 advisors. One was Bilam, who later was known in the Chumash as the non-Jewish prophet. One was Eov, who was known as Job. There's a book in one of the Torah books is called Eov, about his life. Job, right, and he suffered a lot. What?
No, I thought it's Job, like
to get a job.
Yeah.
No, that's how his name is pronounced in English, Job. Job, a job.
Okay.
Yeah, Eov, there it is, in the 3rd column. And the 3rd one was Yisro, Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law. What happened? When Paro said that he wanted to torture the Jews and make them slaves and all that, so Bilam said it's a very good idea. Yisro said that he is against the idea, and Eov was quiet. He didn't want to say it's a good idea because he didn't think it's right. He didn't want to say it's not a good idea because he didn't want to go against Paro. So it was quiet. But because he was quiet, that's why later he had a life of suffering. Bilam, because he spoke in a way of supporting Paro to torture the Jews, that's why he was later killed. And Yisro, because he spoke out against Paro, he was rewarded and he became the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu. So from this we learned that sometimes being silent, I don't know if you ever saw this book, it's called When Silence is a Sin. It's a book that's printed, it's about giving away land in Israel and the way we deal with terrorists, and sometimes being silent about something is what encourages negative things to happen. And therefore, even though you say, oh, I'm being passive, I'm not doing anything, but when you don't do something, when you have to do something, that also is also a sin. So I'm going to jump again to number 11. And that's also a very famous pasuk. We're going to learn more about it. It's going to come up. There's a pasuk in Mishlei, also in Proverbs, words written by Shlomo Melech, where he says, Eis ledaber, there's a time to speak and there's a time to be silent. So this is exactly what we're saying, that there's a time for both. There's a time where you're expected to speak and there's a time where you're expected to be silent and be quiet. And the art is to know when I should be quiet and when I should be speaking. But to understand that the quiet is important, to understand that the speaking is important, but just to understand what's the right time and the right place for everything. So now, to bring out the advantage of speech, even though we say that quiet and silence is the best thing, but not when it comes to Torah, not when it comes to prayer, or not when it comes to saying something good and supportive and encouraging to a friend, then it's a positive thing. So one example is number 7. Chaim heim l'mitzoeim bepeh. It's life to those that bring out Torah study verbally. I don't know if you ever noticed what a men's yeshiva looks like, but you can hear it maybe. What it sounds like, right? But not only when people are studying together, chavrusa, each one speaks to the other, but men, when they're studying on their own, also say the words verbally. And it's based on this pasuk, where it says, Chaim Haim, the Torah brings life, the Moitzoeim, to those that bring it out. And the Gemara, the oral Torah says, what does it mean to those that bring it out? Those that bring out the words of Torah verbally. And actually, there's a whole, I would say, segment in Chassidus that talks about that when you speak about things verbally, it brings out more depth in your understanding than you had before. Even if you're talking to another person, or even if it's just you yourself, bringing out things verbally has a certain power that in some way you're able to access the deepest part of a brain, dafka through speaking out verbally. So in those situations, speech is a positive thing. Another place where we see that speech is a positive thing is number 8. We know that the world is divided into 4 categories. The 4 categories are the inanimate, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and what's the 4th category? Us, human kingdom. And what is the word for the human kingdom? Medaber. The human kingdom should have been the intellect. Medaber means the one that speaks. In fact, parakeets can also speak. Today, walls can speak. Doors can speak. Cars speak. Everybody speaks. Yeah, this machine here speaks. Just the other day, he started to speak in the middle of class, right? So everything can speak. What's so special? So a person can also speak. So obviously, the power of speech, where it's in a person, is something very powerful, and it's something very positive, and we could use it in a positive way. So let's not think that the Mishnah is negating the using the power of speech in a positive way, and a person should be a hermit and be quiet, stay away from people, and just don't get involved in anything. That's not what the Mishnah is saying. Just saying that the state of a person should really be silenced unless there's something there to speak, because speech is really something very powerful, and this in itself defines in what way man is superior to everything else in creation. Number 9, one more to finish with. Mila bezuzi shtika b'tzrei. It's a very famous quote. People use it. And that is, a zuz was the currency in times of Gemara. It's like saying, I'll give you $1 for a word, but I'll give you $2 for silence. Okay, to be continued. Yeah. Anybody going straight to the door? Rachel, today you going straight to the door? Yeah? I want you to change your plans. Can you ask you to give this to Mr. Rubble? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.